Hello, good morning, Liv and Reese. It's a pleasure to have you guys here together. It's kind of strange, actually, but we're here to talk about an article which was recently shared on the Archaeo-Chat Facebook page, and that is to do with sexual abuse, actually, out in the field. Now, in a slightly broader scientific sense, but also specifically in the archaeological field and field work. It sparked a very polarized discussion on the Facebook page. Some people saying, oh, it doesn't happen at all, other people saying it happens all the time, and we figured that this was important enough to try and try and hash it out a bit, try and have a bit of a conversation. So I suppose first of all, Reese, since you posted the article, can you just comment and outline what you think the content was about?
Absolutely. Well, to begin with, it's based on research done by Catherine Clancy, who works in Illinois in the United States. Basically, what the article is about is a can of worms, as it were, in what is portrayed as sexual assault, physical and mental assault, and it's basically written about the idea of abuses coming from all different parts of the archaeological field, specifically in field work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, as I say, the response was very polarised, and I suppose to bring you in on this, Liv, do you think that this definitely does happen?
I know it happens. I haven't been a victim myself, but I've heard a lot about it in the field. It doesn't happen all the time, as I'm aware, in Sweden, but it's definitely an issue. And I have had friends affected, so it's an issue.
Right, I see. Well, I have to say, I've never been approached. Maybe I'm just not pretty enough with my beard, I don't know. But I know that this kind of got your back up a little bit, Reese, in so much as you seem to have felt as though men were being unfairly portrayed in the discussion surrounding this.
Well, yes. It wasn't so much the way men were being portrayed in the article. In fact, that was exceptionally good. But the issue was based around some of the comments were talking about how it's these ivory tower, middle-aged or older-aged men preying on young, beautiful women in the field. And I don't think that's the case, and I certainly don't think that's what the article or the data was presenting. I've sent some data over to you, so that can be put up sometime. Also, what I feel is the case here is that Catherine goes out of her way to get statistics from 600 people specifically, and divides them female and male. And the statistics end up to being 20 to 30% male victims. Now, that's not saying that we should turn this into a gendered debate. It's not about gender. It is about sexual assault and assault of any kind being portrayed in an environment where it's very, very easy to take advantage of a person. And I just think to reiterate the point here is that within the first, and I'm quoting Catherine here, within the first month, 98 women and 23 men responded to the call of answering some questions, which is how the data was acquired, and it had a lot of troubling results, including everything from sexual abuse, so physical sexual assault, including everything up into rape, and then going further into sexual harassment, which I think sexual harassment is a more difficult one because every person has a different level of what is sexual harassment and what isn't sexual harassment. There are some very obvious ones, but I believe that this one can be kind of mediated between the individuals involved. But the most depressing thing about the article is the lack of support from higher up. Now, some of the people higher up portrayed these acts. However, all of the data shows that there are no people to contact if an incident like this happens. There's no setup to say, okay, if you ever feel like you're being sexually harassed, you need to go see X person here or Y person there, which is exactly the same as the conversation they're having about the armed forces at the moment down here, going by rank. But anyway, I just feel that, yeah, it's a discussion based on sexual abuse of people and an abuse of power rather than an issue of male and female.
Okay. Well, do you have anything to say on that, Liv?
Just that I agree. It's definitely an issue that I don't think should be gender specific, because it's such an obvious problem for both sides, and it doesn't need to be sides in this issue because it's often a criminal act, and the issue itself should be discussed rather than turned into some gender discussion of who got it worse.
Okay, well, in that sense, I'm glad to see that we're not contesting the existence of such abuse. That's brilliant, and we're certainly not going, we have it worse, or or so on, based on our gender. But I suppose the question then, the very obvious question is, what should happen? What is a good field work environment? Now, I certainly have some might say a slightly naive perspective, whereby actually some of these issues just don't really occur to me. And I don't mean that because I'm a man, but Mrs. Soup is forever actually praising and shaking her head at me, because I just don't think about actually the fact that the world can be a rather difficult place depending on your gender. I just see people. I don't tend to see genders, or to see, for example, the possibility for abuse in that sense, I guess. But what should be a good fieldwork environment? What do you think, Liv?
I think there has to be rules set up, and you have to have the discussion early on, so you open the climate for discussion about it, because if you never talk about it, it will most likely go on the table. And have a person that is responsible to keep an eye out, especially in a field school situation. I've been to a few field schools and I've worked in one, and it's an easy situation for people to be victimized in, because they're away from home, we're all living in the same place, it's very casual often, and sometimes the dynamics get very tense, since we're long hard days, a lot of sun, not too much water, and we're all up in our faces all the time.
So in some way, having a formal space where it's just acknowledged that this is a very particular working environment. You will be pressured, you'll be stressed, and also you're going to be living in close quarters, which will lead to romantic tension, professional tension, so on. What do you think of that, Rhys? Do you think that having this formal structure is a good idea?
I'm glad somebody hit the nail on the head there for me before I said anything, but I think that's one of the main points which makes this a layer cake issue, where the archaeological field and all sciences that work in the field, which is this article is based on, not just archaeology, I should mention, is that you are working in close proximity to other people, and you are going into remote locations from time to time. You are going to be sharing sleeping quarters, sometimes with people of the opposite sex, sometimes same sex, it doesn't really matter. But the point of it is that it's not a normal 9 to 5 office job working environment in all conditions. And in some respects, from when people go to universities, when you're going to these summer camps and doing archaeological field work, there is pressure for people to, I suppose, find romance in these situations. And I would refer to one of the videos Indiana Bones done earlier, in a couple of years ago, I think. But we go on to basically acknowledge that these digs can become messy in some ways. They can become fantastic memories in other ways, because people do have romantic and sexual relations in them. But yeah, there's a huge difference between consensual sexual activity in the field and sexual harassment. And it's up to each individual as to where they draw the line and then ask for help from somebody higher up, I think.
I suppose it must in part come down to the expectation of romance. I mean, undeniably, archaeology is, for want of a better word, it's a sexy subject. People sort of go, oh, archaeology, you know, I wish I was an archaeologist.
Romantic people.
Well, exactly, and if you look at us three, we're three of the most beautiful people in the world. But but more to the point, there is that sort of passive expectation that there'll be a sense of adventure, a sense of discovery, and perhaps, unfortunately, some people go on archaeological excavations looking for it. I suppose looking for something more than just the academic or just the physical in terms of the finds. I know I've certainly seen that myself. I mean, for example, as you say, Liv, on field schools, there have been situations where people essentially go out thinking, oh wow, I might be able to have some sort of summer romance in Cyprus or something like that. And I suppose what I find quite difficult about this and quite uncomfortable is that it's almost a shame that you're having to curtail those expectations. You're having to say to people, well, actually, no, we need to formalise this. Because on the one hand, it's quite nice to have that slightly romantic approach to archaeology. But I suppose, as Rhys is saying, there is a tremendous difference between consensual relationships and being harassed. I mean, what would you like to see come out of this sort of discussion, Liv? What do you reckon would be a good result?
I think a good result would be to start some things that already happened during the discussion on the Facebook page, that it is talked about, because especially in academia it's very often hushed up. You don't want to talk about it, you want to keep a nice approach, and you don't want to talk about that kind of problems within the institution or in your field schools because it looks really, really bad. So you have to talk about it, and you have to keep remembering that it's more important to talk about it and try to solve it and change the attitudes that allow these kind of things to happen, than to be embarrassed and just try to hush it all away.
Okay, I see you nodding, Rhys. What do you think to that?
Well, that's true. That's the best way, is to talk about it, and having an on-site zero tolerance policy when it comes to any issues like this. However, when I said layer cake before, I mean that because there were two other problems that this curtails that a normal sexual assault case does not. Number one, when you're going to an archaeological site, it may not be in your own country. It may be in a country that is different culturally, maybe more conservative in some areas. So if you're going to a site, for example, where local people have a more conservative view about sex and being dressed in a certain attire, things like that, that's going to create problems about coming out, for starters, plus the isolation. And in the article, it does say that 20 of the 600 complaints actually came from about local people, so local excavators and stuff, so a very small amount. So we have to keep that in mind. It's not people in these countries. It's most of the time it's people that have come to this dig from probably the same country you're from.
That's true, but nonetheless, I mean, I've definitely heard of people, for example, digging in the Middle East, you know, girls being attacked or whatever because they're wearing clothes which are deemed to be inappropriate. You know, I don't mean attacked, but certainly abuse. You know, having abuse thrown at them by people.
Zahi Hawass has been accused, and a personal friend of mine had a female colleague who went over to Egypt and claimed that she was attacked by Zahi Hawass himself, and when she didn't, I suppose, submit to his
advances.
She found herself on a plane very quickly after that, kicked out by the antiques authorities there. But this is my point.
It's worthwhile just very briefly saying, obviously, we're not actually saying that that's necessarily absolutely true. We're not accusing him.
Yeah, it was an accusation. It was an accusation. Yes. There's nothing more to it.
Allegedly, yeah.
But yes, that's the first part of the layer cake, is that can happen in areas which are going to be isolated. The second part of that layer cake does happen in normal sexual assault, is that one of proof. Mm-hmm. Now, sexual assault cases are notorious for being unable to prove in some cases, even so far as people saying there's victim blaming involved, which there is on occasions in areas. But my issue is that if you are out in isolation once again, even if you do get someone to take you seriously and you are saying, I've been sexually assaulted by X, Y, and Z, how do you go about proving it in some ways? I mean, we do have rape kits and things like that, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be very, very hard.
Well, that is true, and to be, I mean, as you say, that is a broader legalistic issue. Sexual assault is notoriously difficult to prove. It essentially comes down to one person against another and their word. But I suppose coming back from proof, and I mean, you know, we've already accepted that this stuff happens. Something that comes to mind is whether or not there needs to be an active attempt to, for want of a better word, break the power structure of academics. And that is to say, an awful lot of people will feel as though they have to please their academic seniors in order to get on in this very competitive archaeological academic world, or in the broader sciences as well. If you get on the wrong side of your tutor, if you annoy the committee on the journal that you're writing to, you may not get published. Your career may well, in that moment, you may feel as though it may well end. Do you think that there needs to be a formal way of actually challenging these power structures? I mean, I'll bring Liv back in on that. What do you think, Liv?
Absolutely. It's especially in the academic world, it's a real issue with if you have a tutor or a professor, and I mean, they can basically say that if you don't keep quiet, or if you don't agree to this, you're f***ed. Your grades will go. I will set your grades, and I won't get you a good one. And you have to be able to challenge this, and maybe anonymous. So you, at least in the beginning, so you don't have the fear of the repercussions straight away. So you can get into the process of working out what has happened before the victim gets punished.
Okay. So maybe having because actually that's a discussion that's happening at the moment, certainly in Britain. I don't know if both of you will be aware, but there's been ongoing revelations, for example, about, say, Rolf Harris. I know Rhys knows about this, where part of the discussion is whether or not people deserve anonymity until they're proven to be, for example, assaulters or whatever. So you think maybe not just a blunt smashing of this power structure, but rather something which is nuanced and serves everyone as best as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay. What do you think, Rhys? Would you be happy with that? With a formal structure for challenging this, the primacy of academic pyramid sort of power structures?
I would, but one thing in the article that did concern me was the recommendation of more female head archaeologists on projects. I don't think that gender should necessarily come into who should be head archaeologists, but I do think potentially there should be more head archaeologists in some ways. One person who deals directly with the site and the archaeology, one person who is in charge of the logistics, and then another person who's in charge of, I suppose, the dealing with people, dealing on the
almost the pastoral care element kind of thing.
Exactly. And then you've got three different people there who you should be able to at least approach one of them. I don't think it should be, because if you were just putting one female or male director above everybody else, and your complaint goes through to them, there is no guarantee based on their gender that A, they're going to take you seriously, and B, that they'll actually do anything about it.
True, and I suppose just to clarify your point, you were saying that you don't like the prescription of more women specifically being heads of. So it's not again, obviously you're not against the idea of more women. It's more prescribing a structure.
I'm all
otherwise, it's good that you and live on opposite side of the world.
No, it's purely based on the fact that I think the right people need to be given to the right jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about gender, and I think a lot of the time, this isn't in archaeology, this is more of a general comment, women are looked over for other reasons, which is the problem. It's not based on their work ethic and things that should get them the job. It's based on the fact that if they get pregnant, they'll have to be paid pregnancy leave and things like that. That's what companies are worried about. Archaeology is a little different, but we are probably one of the only disciplines around the world where I think the numbers are relatively equal.
I think if not actually more women. I mean, there were certainly more women on my course when I did my first degree. I mean, as you say,
how many actually go into practical archaeology when they're thinking first?
Well, yes, good point. Yeah, okay.
You can study a subject, that doesn't mean you get to work in it.
That's true. That's very true. Indeed, I studied cheese making and.
You're not a cheesemaker?
I'm gutted. But no. Well, on that bombshell, I'm into cheese making. I'm not really. But anyway, I think that's probably a good place to bring this discussion to a close. It's been quite a long discussion, and if depending on what people's response to this is, we may well come back to this. I assume you're both up for that. But I'm quite pleased with what we've touched on here, and hopefully, as you say, if nothing else, it just helps people to talk about this stuff. The more places there are to just have a forum to discuss it openly without some assumption of I suppose finger pointing. That's one of the things that some people seem to be quite scared of when it comes to this issue. I think the better, if people can just say, oh yeah, well this happens, here's how we might be able to solve it. I think that's probably a good thing. Well, in that case, thank you so much for your time, both Rhys and Liv. Now, just at the moment, what happens is you sort of shrink on the screen. So first of all, bye-bye, Rhys. And then bye-bye, Liv.
Bye-bye.
Oh, will she pop up? Oh, no, she hasn't popped up. Never mind. Okay, right. Well, as I say, until next time, let's just see what happens. And as ever, do take care, everyone at home. Please do comment below, have a bit of a discussion. What do you think about these issues? Obviously, they're important, but to what extent do they demand drastic change in the field? I think we've certainly made our points clear today, but let's see what you guys think. Bye-bye.